fellow golf swing junkies and golf instruction nerds. You can always count on this man to ask the good questions in press conferences around and on the PGA Tour. And I'm so glad to have him. He's been here before. He's Luke Kerr-Dineen. How's it, my friend? How are you?
I'm good, Mark. How are you? And I'm just grateful to be back here. I'm a loyal listener and obviously love chatting with you. So always a pleasure to come on.
Well, the fact that you're listening makes me feel better about me and what we're doing here, because I know you're very insightful and have an incisive mind, and you ask all the good questions. So, before we get into it, tell us when you were last on the show, you were with golf.com. You've now changed employers. You got something new on the go.
Yeah, so I'm over at Golf Digest where I oversee all our game improvement content. Nothing but good things to say about golf.com, but
Mhm.
I actually started my career at Golf Digest before I moved on and covered some general sports at USA Today. So it's nice to come back home, for lack of a better word. We're doing tons of cool video stuff over here, which is probably the most fun part of my job. And then obviously lots of nerdy content, which hopefully will entertain people and also inform them along the way and help them play better golf.
You have a fan here, folks, because if you follow Luke, he's at LKD, I think is the handle on Twitter, X. Way back when I was a little tot and I had a whole lot less gray hair. In fact, that was about 40 something years ago. Golf Digest used to have full page swing sequences, and each page you turned would be a spot in a star's golf swing. And I cut every single one out of every magazine I had. I still have the filed in those plastic sheets, those envelopes, and I
Mm.
filed them all together from like in the 90s, Luke. So you reprising the stuff in digital form is a whole lot of fun for me. Thank you.
Oh, it's amazing. We have the whole archive too online over at Golf Dodge, and it's so much fun to just dive through that. I mean, like you were saying, full page sequences of the greats, Tom Weiskopf, and it's funny because you could see about the time when Golf Digest started realizing, like, oh, this is a good idea. Readers like this, we should do it. And they would just throw in sequences of Ben Hogan and Sam Snead, and it's unbelievable the amount of stuff that's in there. And it's a real honor to be part of this company now, and also just to look back at what we've been doing every day over the years.
Well, all this legendary stuff was gathering dust until you breathed life into the thing. So thank you. Speaking of breathing life into it, for folks who watch shows like the Golf Channel or whatever, when you have press conferences before big events, you'll always hear Luke in the audience of the press corps, and everyone's asking the questions like, well, what do you think of Liv and all this sort of boring stuff? And then there's you. It'll be like, so Rory, tell me why you're doing this with your golf swing. And then I'm like, then my ears perk up. So after you were at Augusta National here in 2024, you wrote a dispatch that I saw this and I texted you right away. I'm like, very smart. We're going to do this. And you quickly came back with, I'd love to. And so I want to tee you off with some of these observations for the folks who want to go and see it. It's called The 10 Things I Learned from the Masters. Now, as I look through these, Luke, it's not necessarily Masters centric. This is just golf improvement stuff, and which is why I was so keen on it. So I don't need to ask you what the inspiration was. I kind of know that because of who you are. So let's dive in. The first thing I kind of laughed at, but me, I'm in the throes of final edits of a book we're putting out from this podcast. And it sort of embodies what I'm feeling right now. And that is the point that you made, that is progress is slow, simple, and boring. Now, I want you to turn that into the golf swing, golf improvement insight that it was for our listeners, please.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. I think if nothing else, that's what we can learn from Scotty Scheffler. And like you said, I'm always the guy in the press room who's asking the technical questions about the golf swing. But every time I try to ask Scotty about this, he doesn't really give you much.
No.
And it took me a while to realize, like, why is that? Am I not asking it correctly? Is he not into this stuff? And really, it's because if you think about what improvement looks like, not just in golf, but in anything in life, it's just having the discipline to do the same things day after day, hour after hour, week after week, month. And that's what has made Scotty Scheffler so good. He gets up there on the range every day and he's checking his grip so diligently, and he's checking his alignment, and he's making sure he's doing these basic things. And that stuff is really boring. A lot of our minds will wander and will try to make it entertaining, and we'll tinker because we're looking to find a new way of doing something. But in having the discipline to to kind of push through the boring stuff and keep doing it, that's what gets you that 1% better each time you go to the range. And
Yeah.
I think that that's what greatness looks like, right? It's this incremental but consistent progress.
It really is. And you talk about Scotty on the range. I took a picture of it one time. He has a 5 iron with a formed or molded grip on it, where he checks his hands every single time and he hits balls with it. And he does this without fail at home and before rounds, he mentions to me. And it is then when you watch him on the course in the pre-shot routine, you'll actually see how he holds the club out in front of his face like this and double checks his hands on the club before he even goes. And when I see this and I'm calling it, sadly, I don't have time enough to really highlight it in the network show. But then I watch amateur golfers and they just grab any old club and just swing away and kind of hope. And the results are kind of emblematic of their manner before they pull the trigger.
Yeah, and I think there's something like mystical about golf in the way that, we all think like, oh, I'm that one thing away from
Yeah.
great, one breakthrough moment. And there are certainly leaps you can take in golf, but like you said, the real story is a little more boring. It's just having the sort of discipline and the commitment to do what you're saying, to be the number one player in the world, going on a run that we haven't seen since Tiger. And yet, every time before he hits a shot, he is meticulously looking at where his thumbs are on the grip. The rest of us, we're just gripping it, it's moving around, we're doing all sorts of things different, and we're expecting the same good results. Scotty is honing in on this stuff.
And for the um, I want to say the informed golfer, the golf fan, people who are watching a show like this on YouTube or listening to a podcast about instruction, they're looking for the fancies, the wrist alignments and the deflections and all this sort of stuff. Where, like Russell Henley said to me, I saw him on the putting green here at our home club. He was in the same spot for like 2 hours, hitting 5 footers and in. And I was like, Russ, dude, seriously? And he goes, I believe that you're going to do the boring stuff well if you want to be consistently good. And now Scotty Scheffler is kind of proving that. And because he is who he is in the game, I think it's shining a bright light on something that's very important for golfers of any skill level.
Yeah, Jason Bale, teaches Lucas Glover and Peter Ulan among others. He has a great phrase. It always sticks with me: is do the ordinary stuff extraordinarily well. And I'm like, yeah, that sums it up, right? I think that's a good little mantra for the rest of us too.
He's actually been on the show and made that very statement. Okay, that'll perfect pivot point to the second thing you learned from the Masters. And this was curious to me because I'll get sports psychologists on the show and they'll be like, well, you've got to be process minded. Stop worrying about the results, be process minded and stick to your process. Then I'll interview one or other pro before the round or the next round, and they'll be like, I just got to stick to my process, let the chips fall where they may, if you will. And you go, embrace a results mindset. So I'm keen for you to elaborate, please.
Yeah, so with the grain of salt here that I'm not a coach, I'm just relaying stuff that coaches and players tell me. But one thing I hear pretty consistently from players is that there is a process to how they walk into a shot and things, of course, pre-shot routine. But their goal ultimately is to go out and cash a check on Sunday, to lift a trophy, and on the Tuesday, they're trying to get their game in shape for the Thursday, right? Like they are trying to get a little bit better right now. And I think that that's what I mean when I say that a lot of pros have this results mindset, that they're trying to make improvements to their swing and they know they're not going to go from 0 to 100 overnight,
All right.
but they are trying to find something that's going to work to some extent pretty immediately, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that could be a feel. Like, so for instance, if I'm trying to work on exiting a little more left, because I tend to get stuck in behind. If I have a feel that's trying to help me do that, and I'm not seeing any level of good shots come out of that, a pro, I think, would discard that and say, okay, I need to find a new feel because this one's not working for me. And they're pretty snappy with how they work through that because they're looking for something they can put in play pretty much immediately. They're looking for some level of immediate return here. Doesn't mean they're going to get to the end destination overnight, but they do kind of want to see like, okay, this is either working or it's not. And if it's not, that's fine, but I need to then pivot quickly. So that's what I think I mean by a results mindset.
We've talked about other instructors, and you talked about Jason Bell, and you remind me now of Martin Hall. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. And it's so true. And your point here kind of makes it's kind of jives with the statement, the next one, where you said, find a new feel for the same thing. Now, for me, this is very important because as a golf instructor, when a client comes, we'll figure them out, set a chart a course for their improvement, identify what they cannot do, what the strengths and weaknesses are, and then I will say, well, if you do X, Y is going to happen, right? And then they might try X, but X doesn't feel right. So then there'll be many things around X that I can do or they can do that'll help them to still achieve Y. So basically, we're finding different ways to respect the same concept. Is that sort of what you're meaning there by the new feel for the same thing?
Yeah, you just nailed it. Like I think this is what's funny is that a lot of players, the stuff they're working on in their golf swing isn't really changing that much from day to day,
Mm.
right? Like the stuff Victor Hovland's working through right now isn't that different than it was weeks ago, a year ago, whatever. But he knows he needs to get into a certain spot or make a certain movement or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you can have a swing thought or a swing feel that works really well for you, that feels great. And then for whatever reason, that just goes stale or it stops working. And you need to find some kind of feel. And in some ways, you need to find a new feel to keep your swing in the same spot that you want it to. And I don't really know why our brains work this way, but sometimes you can grip a club and it feels great. And sometimes you can grip a club in exactly the same way. And for whatever reason, it feels maybe a little stronger or a little weaker than it does today for whatever reason. And I think that pros are constantly looking for just that tiny little feel that they can take to the course, they can focus on, and it allows them in some ways to focus by focusing on this feel, allows them to focus on performing the same move that they're looking to in their golf swing.
Yeah. I want to mine this a bit more because I think the golfer at large, when they go out to play, the only feel that they have, and this is my voice of experience talking from thousands of lessons given, where I say to them, how did that feel? And they'll be like, well, it felt good. And they were just referring to how the ball was struck. And I'm like, okay, what felt good? And then it's like, well, the hits. And I'm like, yeah, but what did you feel? Are you self-aware enough? Now, the professional golfer, the elites, like Justin Rose said to me, he goes, when he was working with Foley, Foley wants to go in places. And Justin was like, all right, but my feels are sacred. Whatever you're wanting to do, they're going to fit into this box for me. So when these guys are playing, and I want you to recount a little bit, they all have their feels. Like with Rory, he's looking for high and wide with his hands. And off the top of my head, I remember Bubba. I used to try and talk about kissing his lead shoulder for a fuller backswing. They all had their little thing that was kind of theirs during their swing, and it wasn't just the way the ball felt off the face.
Right, exactly. And I think sometimes what you'll often see too is so if Rory, I'm not, this is just like if Rory does like feeling high and wide and big and always has that kind of draw feeling, right? But sometimes you may feel wide with your left arm. Sometimes you may feel wide with your right wrist. Sometimes you may feel wide with your, trail arm, whatever it is. So he likes this general umbrella feel of feeling nice and wide. But day to day it changes. So he's still trying to get like wide, for instance, but they're just different ways of feeling that. And some may feel better whatever on a Tuesday than they do on a Thursday versus a Wednesday. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, that the literal thing you're working on probably won't change around that much. Like your club face is too open, you need to get it closed. But some days that feeling may win or be won or lost in your right hand versus with your shoulder versus your arm, whatever helps get you through that round, like that's going to work for you that day.
Fantastic. On to number 4 quickly. Embrace the new school waggle. Now, I've seen too many golfers just look like statues over the ball. And I watch the professionals day in and day out, and they are constantly moving. But I'm keen to hear your take on the new school waggle because, I remember my Bible back in the day when I was a kid was The Modern Fundamentals by Hogan. And I basically, what he said about the waggle, I copied identically from his words. So I want to hear about the new school waggle from you, please.
So I think, I feel like waggles have always been regarded as pretty important. Like you got to keep moving, you got to relieve the tension. This is anecdotal, but it seems like more and more players adopt that, but then they flow into it some kind of technical thing that they're working on as a way of kind of making this technical thing feel a little more loosey goosey.
Yeah.
And so the new school waggle is, instead of just purely feeling the Trevino movement, get the nervous energy out, what you see is like a rehearsal of sorts
Yeah.
that's somewhere between a literal drill rehearsal and a waggle. So,
Mm.
you'll see Rory has one of these now where he's picking up the club a little more steeply in order to help him on his backswing. Ludwig Aberg tends to stand a little far from the ball. So what he'll do is he'll get really bunched up into his arms really close to his legs, and then he'll place his club behind the ball and extend his arms out just to help get his setup in the right spot.
Yeah.
Max Homer was doing it a ton at the Masters, tilting his upper body down. It's just some small technical thing that you could miss if you don't look closely enough, but just helps get their body in the right spot, gives them a tiny bit of feel.
In a funny way, this ties in with your first point where you can kind of package this as, slow, simple, and boring and kind of necessary to me to hitting my good shot because I'm so with you. I critiqued, I'll be honest with you, my daughter the other day, whose golf swing is beautiful, but she's good, but she's kind of learning the game in a way. And every practice swing she makes looks the same. And I'm like, if you're trying to hit a high draw, the practice swing should look way different, or the rehearsal should look way different to if you're trying to punch something out from underneath the trees. Are you on board with me here? Is it the same idea?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I feel like you see Tony Finau do this stuff too, where you'll see him this technical change that you need to do, just
Mhm.
making it feel a little more natural, like a bit more of a flowing movement. And the best way of doing that for a lot of these guys is the second before you actually pull the trigger and hit a golf shot.
Yeah, just in the interest, because we lost you there for just a few seconds, would you mind revisiting, please, the Tony Finau observation because we lost you just for a little while there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You'll see something that Tony Finau does quite a lot when he's setting up over the board. He's looking at his target, and then he'll make quite an exaggerated sort of out to in looping
Yeah.
waggle backswing rehearsal thing. I mean, it looks like a waggle, but it's also kind of a rehearsal because he's trying to feel like he's going out and then looping it under. And
Yeah.
so this is solving two things. It's solving the technical fix that he's working on, but it's also relieving some tension, helping him stay loose, keeping movement. And again, it's somewhere in between, right? Where you're performing a little bit of a movement in the last seconds before you hit the ball. Helps put your mind at ease, helps relieve some nervous tension. And again, it just gives you that little feel that solves a technical issue that may be lurking in your golf swing.
Fantastic. I think the alleviating of the nervous tension and putting the mind at ease is a biggie over there too. Hey, and I always say to people, I'm like, if you're going into an examination, we've all done it. You got your book with you and you just got to suddenly look at that one question one more time, just so you don't have a blank when the examination is posed. Okay, onward. Oversimplified head tilts. And just open disclosure, I feel like tilts and extension and pivot Words I'm hearing ad nauseum right now in golf instruction.
Mm.
So off you go.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. We don't like jargon around these parts, but I think that the simplest way to think about this is that in many ways, as Michael Bree was saying, the your club's going to follow where your eyes are pointing. So if your eyes are pointing out to the right, your club's probably going to swing out to the right too. If it's pointing out to the left, it's going to swing out to the left. So this is a pretty, you can see it pop up in golf swings, like we keep talking about Rory swing, but he's a bit more of a draw guy. And what does his head do through the ball? His head kind of tilts and
Uh-huh.
tucks back into his body, and his eyes are pointing out to the right, and that's where he swings, right?
Yeah.
So I think if it's in some ways you can spot it in every golf swing, just literally look at their head at impact and see where their eyes are pointing. And again, it's something you can maybe use to counteract a move in your own golf swing, right? If you tend to swing over the top, maybe your head is tilted in the wrong direction. Your eyes are pulling out to the left. And it's just a simpler way of solving a little more confusing problem for a lot of people.
How about this though? You know me, I'm a big one for respecting Bob Jones and turning three strokes into two. And I feel like all the golfers listening, no matter where your skill station is, if you're good at shot number three, make bunches of threes. And one of those shots, number three, is good lag putting, hitting
Mm.
long range putts well. Um, and just organizing your eye line on the putting green is a big deal too. Tell people how many professional elite golfers you see with a mirror on a green prior to a round of golf, huh?
Oh, I mean, yeah, every single one
Huh.
seems, I mean, if somebody told me that 90% of pros use mirrors, I would say that seems a little low. Like
Yeah.
it's might be 100%, literally every single day. Not all of them spend hours on it, but it seems like every single one gets on a mirror at least for 5 minutes and just make sure their head's not tilted in a wacky direction, that their eyes are pretty straight relative to the golf ball, because they know that if your eyes are tilted out to the right, your putting stroke probably is going to be too.
Oh, brilliant. Love it. Okay, onward. Look for a pattern. Look, I'm a biggie on this, and especially patterns on the golf course. And you'll find PGA Tour caddies. Now, I'm stepping aside, but here's just the anecdote. Um, the PGA Tour caddy is as good as their funds are as good as what their player plays. So they're fiercely motivational and they're very factual about everything. And they're keeping numbers on how far the ball's traveling on the golf course all of the time. And so, and if they see their dude hitting a certain pattern all the time with the ball's traveling shorter, they're letting the guy know about it. So nothing is missed prior to the swing is made. Now, that's another aside. That's a pattern for how are we going on the day. And we're not going to try and do something we can't. When you talk about looking for patterns, what do you mean?
So I think the takeaway here is just to be observant about your own game,
Mm-hmm.
really. Like a lot of people, like stat tracking is becoming obviously huge among the amateur level. Maybe you're using a system like Arcos or something like that where you can literally track it. But if not, like I don't think you should just be rinse and repeating golf shots and not really thinking about what just happened after them. And it doesn't require, it's not a huge chore mentally, but just ask yourself, oh, I seem to be missing short right of the green a lot. Oh, I seem to be pulling my shots left a lot. And just, maybe you're marking it down on a scorecard. It doesn't even need, I mean, Jason Duffner told me once that he's not meticulously keeping his stats like Matt Fitzpatrick, who records every single shot. But he is going through his round, after his round, he's going through his round and just saying, oh, I did miss that shot left, didn't I? Oh, I missed that one left too. Oh, I missed that one short right. Okay, well, I seem to miss the short left. And he's just kind of a gut check feel. And that's something that the rest of us can do very easily. And it can be very informative about what's going on.
Yeah, look, it's so important. I mean, it's trite, but every stroke is worth one, and all those ones add up quickly. Now, if this was your portfolio and you're watching the stock, you'll be watching the stock market because if stuff's going bad, you're not just going to double down, put more money in there, kind of thing. It's the same deal. Whereas golfers, we can get a little numb. Maybe I would almost say intellectually lazy because people don't take time to look for this stuff. And when I mean
Yeah. And
intellectually lazy, they will go straight to fixing the golf swing as opposed to maybe, and I would go further. If you're seeing a tendency on the golf course, before you blaming your golf swing, look for the situation. Was it off a certain lie, or was the wind in a certain direction? Something like that certainly will have an effect on your shot quality and result.
Exactly. And, Mark, you're obviously a really good coach too. Like, what's the first thing if a student came to you and said, "Hey, Mark, help me. When I mishit it, I hit high right shots and they
Mhm.
go shorter." Instantly, that helps you fix that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this is like really important stuff for the student, like me, to know. And so if I can just give you a baseline, like, "Hey, here's a quick download on my game. I thin my chips and I almost never chunk them." Like, suddenly that means a lot to a coach. They can fix you a little bit
Start
better, a little
looking in
bit
the
faster.
right direction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a story behind that, and this is how important it is, people. I was fortunate way back in the day to meet John Jacobs, to me, one of the probably the father of modern golf instruction. And I watched him give a lesson basically with his back turned on the guy hitting. And all he did was ask the guy, "How did you strike it?" And he would watch the ball flight. And he got the guy to straighten off a slice by just watching the ball flight
It's
because he
incredible.
understood face alignment, swing path, that sort of stuff. All he needed to know was contact quality. And he helped the guy without looking at him. And that speaks to watching and being observant and not just looking at it as if it's a bad shot. There's always a trend to something.
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes the fix is easier sometimes than you may think.
Mhm.
It's the recognition that can be the difficult part sometimes.
Yeah. I love this one. The former college golf coach in me smiled when I read it. Good bogeys versus brain dead bogeys. Now you could put any score in there. It could be good doubles versus brain dead doubles, but it's just the concept thereof. So please go.
Yeah, exactly. For a pro, like the brain dead bogeys quote came from Brian Harmon, but again, for you, maybe a brain dead double, right?
Mhm.
And really, the way to think about this is that bad shots happen in golf, right? Sometimes you're going to step up on a tee and you're just going to carve one out to the right, and that's really, really annoying. But when you do that, you may hit a good shot back into the fairway and chip it on and give your next putt a good go, and then you tap in for a bogey. And you know what? Like, that's a pretty good bogey. Or maybe you get up and down for bogey because you got in some tree trouble or whatever it is. Grinding out bogeys, or whatever it may be, grinding out pars, grinding out bogeys, you should take pride in that, because that's going to happen sometimes. The really annoying doubles or the really annoying bogeys are the ones which are just self-enforced errors. They're the ones that 3 putts is a classic brain dead bogey. Striping a drive down the middle, having a wedge into a green and making a bogey, or the famous Tiger Five, his
Yes.
various metrics that he used to do. No bogeys on par fives was just a rule. Like, there's no excuse. You don't need a birdie every one of them, but you can't bogey them. And that could be double for the rest of us or whatever. But again, you don't need to reinvent the wheel to play good golf, but you do need to just keep a cap on your mistakes. And I think that that's really the key with this.
I want to drill this down a bit more because the brain dead bogey to me is honestly brain malfunction. I can forgive a bad swing, but you can maybe misstrike a wedge or whatever. But I think with you not picking judicious targets or having a real time assessment, really, of who you are as a player and aiming for a hole that you shouldn't be aiming at, and then you hit it in a bunker or water or whatever, and you make a big number, that's the deal. So to that, folks, this is what you can practice. And this is the college coach in me coming out. I used to have a rule with my team. They used to go play where if they had inside 125 yards, okay, the club that they hit that shot with was the club they had to hit, pardon me, so they had inside 125 yards. The rule was when they're out playing, the next shot had to come with a putter. So if they hit a stupid shot and they missed it in the bunker, they had to use putter from there on until they got the ball in the hole. Or if they try to gas a sand wedge and it came up short 50 yards, whatever it was the same kind of deal. And all of a sudden, you would see these kids smart up because they're like, okay, he's real. So they would aim to the middle of the green, make 4 or option 3, and get out of there, as opposed to making those brain dead bogeys.
Exactly, dumping it in a bunker with a whatever, getting greedy, thinking, "Oh, this is my time to hit one club," Or even, it's funny. I was on the phone with Eduardo Molinari the other day for an article that I wrote, and he was saying that basically it's still true for tour players that when you're in a bunker, anything on the green is a shot, is a marginal shot game. and this is for tour players, you know, like it's again, it's just about taking the disaster off the table here. So the whole like, oh, maybe I can get cute with this, you know, maybe I can sneak a 6-iron over this lip instead of a 7-iron, and then drilling it into the lip. That's a brain dead mistake.
I've seen a few of those. Golly. Look, Victor Hovland was a little unlucky at Oak Hill last year with that fairway bunker shot. But if he picks one more club, Brooks Koepka may not be the winner of the PGA, and Victor might have his first major. But
Exactly.
a couple more. Um, we'll kind of work them in together because I kept you for a long time and I know you're busy. Aggressive doesn't mean dumb. That's the first one. And the other one is don't let nerves change your process. Now, folks, you can find this article if you go follow at LKD or Golf Digest. But talk about aggressive doesn't mean dumb. I think that was a Scottyism as well there from the Masters.
Yeah, so Augusta's so unusual because the greens are so sloping. Obviously, you know better than anyone. There are a lot of these shelves, right? There's big slopes and then there are flat, tiny flat spots. And so sometimes you'll just see a pro aim straight at the pin and you'll be like, whoa, what's he doing? And it's because effectively the rest of the green is big and sloping that effectively that part of the green doesn't exist, right? He's aiming at the pin because he has to, because that's the only real flat spot.
Right?
So I think that's just a really interesting quirk about Augusta. Quirk's the wrong word, but you know what I'm getting at. It's an interesting design kind of quality about Augusta that sometimes the pin in some ways is irrelevant. You're just trying to take a line in which your ball's going to be in a relatively good spot, and that means being creative sometimes.
I'm glad you say that because it's, I don't know where I first heard this, probably eons ago, and it wasn't mine, but I've heard it being said that you make aggressive swings towards conservative targets. Now, yes, if you have to play to a certain area given the situation, understood. But otherwise, swing aggressively just to the middle of the green or whatever you're deciding, as opposed to going, well, wishy washy, and I'm going to die during my swing when I'm approaching one or other shot.
Exactly, exactly. You're trying to find a spot that's going to leave your next shot in a better position ultimately, right? You're like kind of constantly playing one shot ahead of the one you're about to hit. And Augusta is just a fascinating case study of that because the pin, obviously it matters, but the slopes and hitting your ball into the middle of the green and having it cream off the left side of the green, that's what you're trying to avoid there. So you're just really going hunting from spot to spot to spot to spot. That's what Scotty ultimately does so well.
Yeah. Dottie Pepper talks about point A to point B golf. Okay, the last one. I'm interested to know if this is from a player or if you just were watching people intently, which I probably think was the answer. You like, don't let nerves change the process.
Yeah, so I was walking around with Ludwig Aubert and his coach, excuse me, Hans Larsen, who's been his coach since junior golf, and he was saying that a big trend in sports psychology used to be that you know, if you're nervous, go to your happy place, lie down in a bed, take deep breaths, and just you get rid of all your nerves. And he said that the biggest shift he's seen in recent years is that mindset's just gone out the window because it's basically impossible. If you're nervous about something, I can't tell you to not be nervous, and I
Mhm.
can't tell you that nerves are bad. The problem isn't being nervous. The problem is when you let your nerves change the way you're doing stuff. You know, so if I'm nervous and all of a sudden I start pressing the panic button and I pull a 5-iron off a tee because I don't want to hit a driver into the trees or whatever it is, that's when it starts becoming a problem. So this is where having these little creature comforts for yourself can really come in handy, whether that be a pre-shot routine, maybe you can do a new school waggle, maybe that'll help you get comfortable, whatever it is, some kind of rock that you can lean on in these moments when the nerves do come that won't last forever, but you just need something to get you through these moments. And this idea that you can just not be nervous, that doesn't exist. So you need to find something else to help you get through the nerves.
Yeah, I've spoken to a bunch of experts. You have too. The the deep breathing is a way to sort of at least settle the heart rate down. But then I think, and this is top of mind because of the work I'm doing just prior to this call, out of the book, Rotella, said it on the show where he goes, I've worked with many top flight professionals. And the golf ball has an uncanny ability to go in the direction of your last thought. So so basically paraphrasing, if you're nervous and you're like, oh my gosh, there's kingdom come down the right-hand side, you're going to redirect your thought and your process to a more constructive target, which almost gets us back to your second to last point.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. Tiger Woods used to talk. Well, he still does. He'll say this stuff all the time, where he'll just say, "Yeah, I'm not trying to be not nervous. He's just trying to reframe his nerves as a good thing. He'll say
Yeah.
nerves are good. The adrenaline is good. Helps me hit the ball further. Helps me focus more. I like when the nerves come. So he's not trying to deny how he's feeling. He's trying to use what he is feeling. And I think that's something that we can all learn a little thing from.
Speaking of learning, you've taught us a whole lot. And folks, this man is my favorite follow on social media because you get everything from old school swings to insights like this sort of stuff. It's all encompassing. So please share for the people, Luke, where they can find you.
Yeah, oh, thanks, Mark. You're way too nice. But yeah, LKD Golf on Instagram. Luke Kerr-Dineen or LKD on Twitter too. My stuff's kind of constantly flowing through Golf Digest. I've got a newsletter called Golf IQ. So all good things. You like it because you're a golf swing nerd at heart, Mark, which we love. So that's what we're doing around here.
I'm amazed. I can only imagine what you have because at the RBC Heritage in 2024, in preparation for the weekend broadcast on Friday afternoon, I just walked around like a fan. Now, granted, I was a fan inside the ropes. My colleagues called me out on this. I wasn't in the fairway. I was just walking inside the rope line, and I was watching Scotty. I'd called him before, working, but I didn't want a producer voice in my head. I just wanted to walk along and sort of take stuff in, kind of like you do. And he hit some shots. I was struck. Talk about targets and smart playing. I watched him hit 12 approach shots. Only one was on the weak side of the flag. Only one. So he played to the smart side of the flag all the time. Not necessarily 30 feet, but always on the safe side of the target. And then he hit this 3-wood on the par 5, the 15th, off a tight lie, up and over those trees down the left in the middle of the green. And I happened to get a video of this stuff. And I put it on Twitter, and the thing is, and counting, it's way over 1 million views already. So I can only imagine the kind of interaction you get with your account.
Exactly. I mean, that's what's so great is that with social media, for all its faults, the thing it does great, right, is that it allows certain communities to find each other. And so, that's the side of this golf ecosystem that we live in, right? We get to talk about golf swings, we get to nerd out about this stuff. Sometimes I'll do an interview with a player and I'll be like, good news. I care 0% about live. I care 0% about all this stuff. I just want to learn what makes you good at golf because I want to be good at golf.
Well, look, I mean, you ask it like a fan. I host this podcast like a fan too, and I love to feature bright minds, and you are one. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I appreciate you too.